A Tree of Palm deserves better than to be forgotten in the Western anime sphere of discussion. Internet streaming has broadened the reach of popular shows and allowed previously inaccessible works to be viewable in the US. YouTube and message boards like Reddit further discussion and critique, potentially bringing new audiences to obscure titles. Yet it speaks to the vastness of the relatively specific corner of animation that anime represents, that a title as intriguing as A Tree of Palm could be so thoroughly left behind by the anime discourse. Released in theaters in 2001 and on DVD in 2005 by ADV, A Tree of Palm was brutalized by critics. Derek Ellie for Variety dismissed the third act of the film as totally incomprehensible. Seamus Royce for Anime News Network felt the film was lost underneath layers of unneeded plot and obfuscation. Sean Axmaker for the Seattle Post-Intelligencer referred to it as an odd, awkward animated epic. Most of the criticism centers around three basic points. The plot and world building get in the way of character development. The main character, Palm, is cold, annoying, and unlikable. Lastly, by fundamentally misunderstanding the point of the film as a simple Pinocchio retelling or children's adventure movie, that it fails to stand out among other anime. I want to explain why I don't find these arguments accurately represent the film, and why I believe it deserves a better place in the anime community. A Tree of Palm was directed by Takashi Nakamura. Nakamura worked as an animator for most of his career, including being animation director on Akira, and didn't really get into directing until the late 90s with his first film, Catnapped. Nakamura explains, "I was an animator for a long time, but I think as I went along, I had stories that I wanted to tell, and how do I do that? I would have to direct them myself." That's Takashi Nakamura in an interview by Andrew Osmond for All the Anime. While he was working on Catnapped, he was likely already forming plans for A Tree of Palm. The film was in the planning stages for 7 years and then spent 3 years in actual production. A point that would be used against the film is his statement that he originally envisioned it as a television series. However, once he knew he was making a film, he shifted the focus of the story and even changed the main character from a robot to a puppet. This new concept would present a spiritual journey for the main character. The story begins with Palm in a near comatose state. Foe, his maker, built him to help his ailing wife, Zeon. At least, that was his purpose until she died. Then, Palm went into a mostly dormant existence. After Palm falls from a tree that he was mindlessly climbing, Foe repairs him, and they are visited by a warrior woman with blue skin who calls herself Koram. Koram entrusts Foe with a capsule containing what she calls the Egg of Toto, and a mythical tree sap called Crosskala. The sap of the metallic kulip tree, like the one outside Foe's cabin, can power technology. Palm is made from kulip wood, and when his sap is replaced with Crosskala, he awakens from his dormant state. Palm is tasked with delivering the Egg of Toto to the subterranean world of Tamas. On his quest to Tamas, Palm encounters Shata, a leader of a band of orphan thieves, and Popo, a young girl that reminds him of Zeon. Palm grows from having no purpose to finding a reason to live, only to be filled with self-loathing over his identity. He believes his salvation lies in Tamas. Character development is the focus of the film. Aside from Palm's personal journey, even minor characters like Popo's mother, Darumaya, receive skillful characterization. In one scene, she is visiting a merchant with her daughter to trade goods. Darumaya is aware the merchant has eyes for her young daughter, and before they enter his room, she grabs Popo's chest and tells her not to act cute. The merchant talks gleefully about Darumaya's past. She was the life of any party and the object of men's desires. Suddenly, he declares he's brought a present. The camera centers on Darumaya's face as she grins expectantly. Jazzy music swells up as she's filled with pride and nostalgia for her illustrious youth. But the music fades, and her smile turns into a scowl when she realizes the present is for Popo. It's a nice way to show Darumaya's twisted jealousy toward her daughter, rather than outright explain it. The shot even lets us empathize with her for a moment, despite the fact that she violently groped her daughter moments before. Another excellent shot shows Popo alone in her mother's room, surrounded by decadence and photos of Daramaya's past. It creates an oppressive atmosphere with contrasting colors between the room and Popo, and anempathetic music that reflects the fantasy in which Daramaya lives. A Tree of Palm maintains empathy as a constant theme. Popo demonstrates it in how she cares for Palm even when he's an emotionless doll, while others, like Shata, fail to treat him like a person. Shata is another interesting case. He could easily pass for the archetypal, scrappy orphan vagabond, but the film carefully examines the person underneath that facade. His singular pursuit of his goals often leads to negative consequences that he brushes off or ignores. He inadvertently inspires the children around him to try and grow up too fast, just like he did. He's especially influential on Palme, to Palme's detriment. It's unfortunate, then, that Palme receives so much ire from reviewers. Palme spends much of the film's first half an articulate, barely sapient automaton. It is important in screenwriting to ensure that the main character acts instead of being acted upon. Palme seems to fail this test, but viewers should remember that the first thing we see Palme do is climb a tree with such reckless abandon that he tears his foot off and snaps his own neck in half. His climb may have been misguided and fruitless, but it did have a purpose. He longs for that higher existence. He desires to truly live. That same passion is inside of him even when his exterior is cold and expressionless. We see this yearning reignited when he meets Popo, whom he mistakes for Xion. In another deft bit of characterization, Palme is shown lovingly clawing his way into Popo's lap when he hears her strumming a tune that resembles the song Xion used to sing. Popo is mortified. To her, all of Palme's grasping and cooing is no different from the merchant's. She screams and shatters her precious loot, smashing it to bits on Palme's wooden exterior. Palme doesn't understand why she beats him. He can't understand. Later, he is finally able to comprehend the death of Xion and apologizes to Popo. Unlike so many other wrongs Popo has experienced, someone has finally acknowledged their mistakes and tried to make amends. Someone has finally treated her like an equal. However, this is still halfway through the film. Palme, after learning what it means for Xion to be dead, becomes fully aware of himself. He is finally able to contextualize the violence and abuse he's experienced up to this point. He was mistreated because he was a puppet. To be alive, to be worthy of respect, is to be active, determined, and above all, human. At this point, Palme's character becomes much darker. He is obsessed with the hope that he can become human if he goes to Tamas. His desire drives him away from Shata and causes him to hurt Popo. If reviewers had trouble relating to him before, now Palme is screaming, hurting his friends, and even killing a baby deer. It's no wonder that he's such a reviled point of the film. This scene needs to be addressed. Toward the end of the film's second act, Palme and friends have just run into a baby deer-like creature being chased by a giant lizard. Palme watches as Shata leaps into action with his broadsword and fights off the beast. Palme, trembling, can't even bring himself to unsheath his knife. That night, Palme takes Shata's sword while he's sleeping and starts swinging it around awkwardly. He cuts through plants and some vines before setting his eyes on the baby deer. He beckons it closer with an unsettling smile before striking it down with the sword. He stands proud for a moment after it squeals and dies. Then the reality sets in, and he realizes he can't undo his awful mistake. Palme idolizes Shata. He is everything a human should be. Everything Palme is not. Palme wanted to know what it felt like to be his hero, to cut with his shiny sword. Death he understands, but killing was still beyond him. He was childlike, ignorant, but all at once he is grown up, and he can't escape it. The guilt follows him for the rest of the film. He denies killing it to his friends. When Popo asks why he doesn't seem sad, he once again blames it on being a puppet. Palme assumes he made his mistake because he isn't human, when that kind of regret is a very human quality. Palme is not the main character of a typical children's adventure story. He's not going to take up a sword and start bravely fighting monsters. He is plagued by anxieties that can torture any human being. He has internalized the abuse he suffered. He hates himself because of his body. He cries out for Popo whenever she's away because he can't stand to be alone. He says cruel things to her because he's afraid of being unable to find his salvation. It's unfortunate Palme is so widely considered unlikable when I found the growth of such a conflicted and troubled character to be extremely compelling. Reviewers have mischaracterized A Tree of Palme as essentially Akira set in a children's surrealist dream world, Carlos Ross for them anime reviews, or more frequently, a sci-fi fantasy Pinocchio, Sean Axman for the Seattle Post-Intelligencer again. These oversimplifications are distressing because it isn't too difficult to summarize what A Tree of Palme is about. It tells the story of a being reaching spiritual balance and understanding fundamental truths about themselves and those around them. Palme begins the film ignorantly, in a near blank slate. He learns to recognize himself through his outward appearance, and this misunderstanding misguides him and fills him with anxiety. Pinocchio is more about how to be a well-behaved child. Nakamura certainly took inspiration from the fable, but only so far as the idea of personal refinement. As he puts it, Pinocchio is a story filled with allegory, about a psychologically underdeveloped soul who strives to become a better human. He sprinkles in some homages, like Palme being called a puppet, or ningyo in Japanese, which can refer to a puppet or doll, braying like a donkey when he's snared in one scene, or him growing a long vine from his nose in another. A Tree of Palme is not a simple retelling. The core themes are similar, but A Tree of Palme applies them more universally than just for misbehaved children. The YouTube channel Man Mode made a solid recommendation video for the film, but he presents an interpretation of the film that I disagree with, despite what I'm sure were his best intentions. Man Mode describes the main theme of the film as what makes us human, and maybe we're actually the bad guys. This is another common summary of the film, and it isn't necessarily inaccurate. However, I find what it means to be human to be such a cliché that it describes every theme and no theme at the same time. Palme learning to value himself and see himself beyond others' prejudices is not objectively the correct takeaway from the film, but it at least is a more specific reading of the subject. This review functions as a defense of the film as well as a recommendation, but it would be disingenuous not to concede some points about the film's quality. While I maintain the character development is handled well, the film's world building can be delivered stiffly. The world of A Tree of Palme is unique and alien, and this necessitates exposition about its structure and history. This exposition can be delivered through straightforward dialogues that don't get revisited. Whether this type of exposition bothers some people or they simply don't quite grasp it that first time, it can alienate those viewers. Much of the world serves a symbolic purpose for growing the characters, and its mysteries are not even entirely understood by those who live there. Some ambiguity is welcome, but nevertheless, this can be a sticking point. The film is animated well and is a beautiful late holdout of cell animation. However, viewers comparing it to the very best of the industry at the time will likely be disappointed. Background elements are visually separate from the parts of the scene that will move, and in one instance, only one, as far as I can tell, a character is drawn out of proportion with the doorway in which she's standing. Nakamura's visual style can also put viewers off. His characters are more abstract than other anime titles, which leads many to believe they're specifically aimed at children. Thus, they express confusion when the film opens with gruesome violence. I found the designs appealing without considering them childlike, but the cute and violent contrast might find an audience in a time when titles like Made in Abyss are popular. There are also many scenes of still environmental shots, which some claimed were to save on animation budget. I don't deny these scenes were likely easier to animate, but they serve a point instead of unnecessarily padding the runtime of an already 2-hour movie. What makes A Tree of Palm stand out visually is its captivating world and aesthetic, inspired partly by René Lalo's Fantastic Planet, accompanied by the captivating and eerie score featuring the theremin-like tone of the Ondes Martineau, played by composer Takashi Harada. A Tree of Palm has an uncanny feel unlike any other anime of its time. With an ambitiously realized world, compelling themes, strong characterizations, and a bizarre aesthetic, A Tree of Palm belongs in the admittedly benign category of cult classic. At least that would be better than its nearly 17 years of utter neglect. I made this without giving away any important spoilers, with the hopes that more voices recommending this film may give it the attention it deserves. A Tree of Palm is worth examining not just by me and one other YouTuber. If anyone watching has seen the film, or will see it, and wants to know more about my thoughts on it, I also wrote an extensive analysis of it that I hope can expand the base of knowledge about this cool movie. Well, thank you for making it to the end of one of my terrible videos. Thank you especially to my 37 subscribers. I don't really know why you subscribe to me. It's obvious that I don't really make videos regularly, but I guess, here's one, so there's that at least. Thanks to Man Mode. I didn't actually talk to him about making any of this, but I just wanted to include his video so that if you wanted to check it out, and you should go check it out. I'll put a link in the description. I made this review because I fairly recently rewatched A Tree of Palm, and I remember I saw it a long time ago, probably back in like 2011, and I really enjoyed it then, and years went by, and I checked out some reviews, and they were all saying it was bad, and I couldn't believe that, so I rewatched it, and yeah, it was just as good, if not better than I remembered. And then I saw Man Mode's video, and I wanted to kind of do something like that, but with more of my perspective. I think it came out fairly well. I mean, it's obvious from any review that I've done since the Technolize one, even, that I'm just reading from a script. I write these scripts as just written reviews, and then I just kind of read them and then edit a video to try and match up with what I'm saying. And that makes the editing kind of way too tight, and I should probably just, stop talking and just let an example play out like a good video, but I didn't think of that till like halfway through making this one. If you hate listening to my voice as much as I do, you can check out my written reviews on my WordPress, as well as my friend's website, Anime Psycho Media. I have a Darling in the Franxx review there, and I'll hopefully have this one up there too. The analysis that I talked about in the video, it's super long. It's going to be in the WordPress. I'm going to put it there. I actually spend most of my time developing games. I have one available on itch.io and GameJolt called Disco. Feel free to give that a try if you're interested. And I also do a podcast with some friends of mine where I talk about anime and argue about it a lot. So yeah, thanks a bunch. This is my cat.